where I got dinner last night.
We've got a helicopter over the top of us now.
Are you waving?
Oh, he's saying it's, yep. Yeah, he's hovering around us now.
That night was one of the longest nights of my life. We were sitting in the pouring rain with a rope hanging off the house, getting eaten alive by mozzies, bailing the boat out about every half an hour because it was filling up full of water. And we did that till about 11 o'clock the next day, and then the helicopter came in.
18 months after one of the worst floods in Australia's history engulfed his home, Mark O'Toole is still living in a caravan with his 4 kids.
That was actually very scary. Like the downforce of that helicopter, the roof was blowing around everywhere, bits of tin were flying off the roof, hit me in the head and stuff.
After 30 hours stranded in a tinny, Mark, his son and elderly neighbour made it into the safety of a Black Hawk chopper.
It was just like a big inland lake. It was something I'll never forget. I've never seen so much water in my life.
Nor had local authorities. The SES and fire and emergency services were overwhelmed by the scale and complexity of the disaster.
If the army helicopters hadn't got us, I don't know how long we would have been out here.
Cascading catastrophic crises means it's a role Defence is increasingly playing. In opposition, Labor put the onus on the federal government.
We can see private trucks, private contractors in here, but a total absence of the Defence Forces and a total absence of any other federal government support.
Now in government, some in Labor are pointing the finger at the states.
The states and territories need to lift their collective game.
Labor MP Julian Hill chairs a parliamentary subcommittee on defence, which has sounded the alarm about an over-reliance on the military during fires, floods and cyclones, and near persistent demands from the states.
In the last few years, more than 50% of the Australian Defence Force members have been called out to do something on a domestic crisis. That's not sustainable. They can't be seen by the states and territories or the Australian community as some kind of shadow workforce. We're risking degrading the warfighting capability of the Australian Defence Force.
The states and territories are the first responders responsible for the SES, ambulance and fire authorities. They can only ask the federal government for defence assistance once their people and assets can no longer cope. Can you point to any kind of response from Defence at a federal level that has, in the committee's view, been superfluous?
We very consciously decided not to go into name and shame of individual jurisdictions and not to go into particular operations.
The Defence Strategic Review is the latest report to recommend that, in natural disasters, the ADF only be used as a force of last resort.
And it doesn't matter how many submissions come into our committee on disaster resilience, how many witnesses we bring up, they will say if the Defence Force doesn't come in, we are stuffed.
Soldier turned Senator Jackie Lambie has examined the alternatives.
Volunteering is going to be the key to this. This is going to be the answer out.
Volunteers are the backbone of state and territory emergency services, but nationally, their numbers are on the decline.
People are not out there volunteering anymore. I don't know what's happened to the country. Where's your patriotism? Fair dinkum guys, we really need a help here.
I would say we'll be there for probably 6 to 8 weeks.
A new shadow workforce can be found, but it comes at a cost. The federal government's pouring nearly $40 million into Disaster Relief Australia, which has tapped into the highly skilled veteran community to build an army of 2,500 volunteers so far.
When the police, the fireys, the AMBOs, the SES and the Rural Fire Service leave because the fires have gone out and the floodwaters have receded, there's really no one that comes into that space to put boots on the ground and help people do their nitty-gritty hard work that puts people back on their road to recovery, other than the ADF.
With teams positioned across the country, DRA says it can replace the role Defence plays in the aftermath.
It's the longer-term recovery that goes on for months and years. So if you have a helicopter pilot that's plucking people off roofs, and then 3 months later that same person is shoveling mud for years, or working on the floor of a nursing home, that starts to erode defence capability.
Like Lismore, the Black Summer of bushfires became a months-long deployment for the ADF. As fire raged in Malakuta, the Navy staged a mass evacuation of residents and tourists who'd become trapped. For a town that's been ravaged by fire before, this is Malakuta's first and final line of defence locally. A total of 6 volunteer firefighters and 2 tankers in a town whose population swells to over 10,000 during summer. And the nearest backup brigade is an hour's drive away. Tracy Johnston is Malakuta's Country Fire Authority captain. She's struggling to recruit the next generation. In her 50s, Tracy's among the youngest here. One of the 6 volunteers is in their 80s.
A lot of people will be scarred and scared from the 1920 fires, of course, and I think everybody's just tired and worn out.
In the aftermath of the fires, residents Mariska and Martin Asher managed to fundraise $500,000 to buy equipment for their emergency services, like a CPR machine and 4-wheel drives.
And now we're one of the best equipped little towns around.
The sky was completely red and black all over.
How many houses did Malakuta lose?
Well, altogether, houses and outbuildings, there was 127
wow.
altogether. Yep.
A changing climate is forcing communities to become better equipped and more resilient, but there's only so much they can do. In Malakuta, there is one road in and out of town through thick bushland.
We're simply not prepared.
We're worried. And so are most of our friends. They're actually really worried. They're talking about leaving town soon, just to protect themselves. That's how bad it is.